Ladies, gents, non-binary friends, hi, hello, it's me, Nox. I am back with another part in the Terrier by Tamora Pierce book. Let's go ahead and get ourselves started, shall we? Friday, April 3, 2:46. When I stood this morning, I nearly fell. My legs hurt so bad. Even the hot soak last night did only so much. I needed them like Mistress Noel taught me to knead bread, biting my lip to keep from yowling like Pounce. As I worked on one leg, stretching it out in front of me on the floor, he draped himself over the other. He understood his warmth eased the muscles. Once I could move without crying, I unlocked my trunk. Back when I was a runner, Mama had made a big jar of ointment for my legs. I think my lord's cook paid a mage to charm it because it worked the best of all Mama's concoctions. I only used it when I could do nothing better for myself, because it worked and because Mama had made it. This was one of those times. How far did I chase that adult creature? I asked Pounce as I rubbed the ointment in. As I got dressed, I muttered about getting new work where I spent my time on my back. Today my landlady said not as I left, though she was there at the window. She nodded, but there was a strange expression on her face. Pounce looked up at me as if I might know why she was so quiet. I only shrugged at him. That was when the rotten vegetables hit me, one turnip square in the shirt, one old onion glancing off my shoulder. I reached for a baton I didn't carry just then and looked for my enemy. 4 of us 2 Gixies stood in the street, their bruises highly colored in daylight. As I spotted them, the older girl threw a cabbage. I dodged. It splattered on the front of my lodging house. "You took our mama!" she cried. "Get her back, you stinking puttock!" The other one started to cry. They were bony, ragged, and sad. With rotten onion stink in my nose, I should have been furious. Mama only paddled us when we'd done wrong. She always told us why. She wouldn't let her men knock us about. She sang to us when she had the breath for it, and went short of food and clothes for us. Yet these little ones loved their mama too. Like me, they were going to lose her. Never mind, it would be for a shorter time than I had lost mine. It didn't matter that last night their mama had threatened to cut off their heads. Mamas were such strong creatures to their children. "Your mama did a bad thing when she struck a dog with a knife," I told the older Gixie. "There's no forgiving that under the king's law. You draw a plate on a dog, the magistrate sends you to prison. If your mama behaves, she'll come home one day. But she was going to prison the moment she attacked guardswoman Goodwin with steel." "Here, you beggars. You've done enough damage. Scat." It was Rosto the piper. Somehow I don't think he'd come along by accident. Be grateful you're still alive to cry for your ma. Be grateful or still your da has 2 eyes in his head yet. I wasn't surprised that Rosto knew their case either, but I was surprised when he flipped each of the girls a copper. They jumped to catch their coin before they got lost in the street muck. Then they ran off before he could change his mind. He sauntered up to me, more graceful than Pounce, hands in his pockets. The folds of his tunic loose, the dark blue cloth clean. Even his leggings were barely touched by street dirt. I marked the print of 6 knives against his tunic. The flat blades hidden on the insides of his wrists made me itch to handle them. I do love a good weapon. Here. He took a cord with a wooden disc on it from around his neck. There was magical signs carved deep in the wood. Cora made it for me to get stains out of my clothes. She does very good charms. Our Cora. He looked behind me at the rows of houses. Nice neighborhood, this, handy to the markets and the riverfront. I hesitated and looked the street over. My own charm against bad magic didn't warm me by turning warm against the skin of my chest, so I took the thong from his fingers. Slowly I passed the disc over the places where the vegetables had smeared my shirt. Wood glowed for a moment, then went dark. The muck dried and fell from my clothes. "Thanks," I gave the disc back. "He just saved me 3 coppers worth of laundering." "I appreciate it. I don't owe you anything, though." He waved that aside. "Look, Cooper, I insulted you, offering a noble last night. I see that now. I was naughty." I glanced at him sidelong and waited. Pounce wandered over. He stood on his hind legs, stretching until his paws were braced on Rosto's thigh. Then he flexed his claws, hooking them into Rosso's leggings. Look here, you, whoever you are, I am not a scratching post. Rosso crouched, taking care not to startle Pounce into ripping his clothes. Gently he rubbed my cat's ears, then Rosso looked up at me, dark eyes wicked. A noble and a half. I nibbled on my lip, then said carefully, You don't want to know bad enough, I suppose. Pity. Rosso made a face like he'd eaten some rotten onion. 2 silver nobles, it had better be worth it. I thought about driving the price higher, just to prove I could, then I decided not to get greedy. After all, we didn't know what those stones were. Pay up. Pounce turned out of Rosso's hold and jumped to my shoulder. Interesting cat he is. Rosso reached over to scratch Pounce's chin again and let 2 silver nobles slide into my fingers so no one could see. Rough, sparkling stones, very colorful, tucked in reddish rock like the kind you find all over the lower city, told him softly. My dogs have never seen any like them. We had another stone like these. Crookshank's grandson gave it to his wife, who's a friend of mine. My dogs will find a mage to see what they are. I wondered if I should tell him folk had tried to steal the first stone. Chose not to. He'd only paid to know what he'd stolen from Crookshank, after all. Stones that 2 experienced dogs can't name? That's a curiosity. This lower city of yours is all tied in knots, you know. Rosso looked down at me. You take care, Cooper, before you get strangled. I'm not a cove who's a bit too interesting and a bit too fast at Kafer's court, I said, but Rosso was on his way, already whistling a jig. I wished I'd thought to ask if he'd sworn to one of the rogue's chiefs or not. I looked at the sun. Perhaps if I rushed, I could still see my pigeons as well as my spinners. No, it was near 11 o'clock. Dust spinners it was. Pigeons are everyday birds. They scummer on my clothes and puke on me sometimes, and I cut thread from their dust spinners are magic. They're exciting. Some corners always have a whirlwind of dust, leaves, and bits of this and that, even on days when there's no breath of air anywhere else. The spinners will be stirring on their cobbles. They won't cool folk off on those hot days, though. Their touch is always dry as bone. They don't only pick up solid things, they gather talk that comes their way. With work and thought, information I collect from them is useful. Best of all, I don't have to give them bribe money for my wages. The spinners are happy to give up their burden of talk for nothing. The weight of our joys and sorrows, and even in the small bits carried to them by the city breezes, bears them down. They can hand that burden over to me and be free, at least for a time. I can't see them all in one day, of course. I try to get to them all once a week. The day I went to the lower city, I started with Shia, the dust spinner just a block from me at the corner with Koskney Street. She's lively, spilling all kinds of talk straight from the slave markets into my ears as she tugs at my tight braided hair and my well-tucked clothes. I'd brought her grit from Cherry Orchard Street, so she'd have something new to taste. She liked that. I memorized what she'd given me to go over later, then went to see Avifa, my messenger and skip. She usually collected the talk of the Northgate guards and travelers. For her, I had grit from the Jane Street kennel. I could see Hashfush as I approached the corner of the Cherry Orchard and Storm Lane. He was 8 feet tall, the biggest I'd ever seen him, in solid gray. Something was wrong. The spinners hate to do anything that might make folk think they're more than just bits of wind at corners. My stripes clenched. Pounce yowled. I don't like it neither, I told him, but there's only one way to know what's bothering him. I gritted my teeth and stepped into Hashfush. My ears filled with cries for mercy. They were cut off with the dreadful sounds I had heard murder done in my visits with the dust spinners, but never so many at once. No wonder Hashfush had picked up all the dirt and litter he could, without more sound from entering his sides. I hadn't seen him in, 2 weeks? I'm sorry, old fellow, I whispered as he dropped the mess he'd picked up to protect himself. I've been starting a new life. Guilt was pricking me. I hadn't been that far from here last night, but no, I'd been off chasing Orva, before I would have come any closer. I opened the bit of cloth I'd carried, my gift of Rover Street grit, and let it trickle to the ground, thinking. Sorting out the sounds, I decided there had been 7 killings, maybe 8 or 9 if some sounds covered more than one death at a time. People disappeared all the time in the cesspool. Not like this. Moreover, it must have been very recent, elsewise the pigeons would have told me. Those 7, 8, or mayhap 9 had been killed for what? The killers had been professionals. They said nothing at their bloody work. Where Hashfish had blocked out more of what they did, they'd begun to dig. Grave and killing ground were the same. They were upwind of Hashfish. How could I tell my dogs? Was there a way to shake up a few rats here in the cesspool? Surely someone had heard of folk gone missing. Wake up, fish puppy, said a scornful voice in my head. Half the cesspool could go missing and folk would make it their business not to notice. The spinner at the corner of Holderman and Houdini held more screams of death. These were fainter, being downwind of Hashfish, thank the goddess. I forced myself to walk up Holderman to the spinner who lived where Holderman crossed Stormwing. That spinner was across from Hashfish in the same wind. It was dreadful to hear the murders again, almost as strong as Hashfish had heard it, but I was rewarded despite my fear. You 3 tell a living soul of what you've done, even your fellow guards, and you'll join the dead. Voice was silky and female. When I clasped your hands at the start, when you hired on, I put a mage mark on each of you. Talk of this, and you'll want to lop your end off, or you die. 7 to 9 dead folk, buried where they fell, I thought as I turned my step toward home. Add to them 3 killers and a mage marks on their hands, fatal ones, and a woman who's a mage. How can I tell my dogs about this so they might take it serious? It would help if they already knew folk were missing from the cesspool, if those missing folk didn't just vanish, as so many people do. If those folk have names and families who seek them. So deep in thought was I that Pounce had to claw my shoulder, startling me nearly out of my boots, for me to hear someone call loudly, "Cooper!" I spun around, yelping as Pounce dug in. Uncle stood behind me, wearing a cityman's dark brown tunic and leggings. Off duty, he wore a sword as well as a dagger. He knew better than to walk out unarmed. "Cooper, did you get muck in your ears? I've been calling you for the last block." He looked me over and raised his brows. "Puppy, what have you been rolling in?" I looked at myself while Pounce insulted him. There was grit on my shirt and breeches, leaves and other trash stuck to my clothes. My hands were smeared with dirt. I felt my hair and pulled away a twig. "I'll wait while you change," Tungsto said. "Wake up, Cooper. Our work doesn't end with the watch. Do you want to learn what those sparklers are? We're going to talk to a mage. A good one." "I'll hurry," I said, and walked home as fast as my poor legs would take me. The clocks were chiming, too. I might well not make it back before it was time to train, so I tucked my dog's gear in my pack, changed shirts, and brushed off my breeches. I washed my face and hands and combed out my hair. Dirt and clutter fell to the floor. I'd never come away so filthy from the spinners before. Upset as they were, I couldn't be surprised. Ready to go, I looked at Pounce. He stared at me, purple eyes slits, as if he was thinking, "Are you going to tell me I may not come?" I opened the door and bowed for him to leave before me. Trotted past, tail high like a victory flag. At least I'd spared myself the shame of having him appear when I'd sworn I'd left him behind. Uncle let us walk alongside him for a block or so before he said, "Followed you for a while. You stood inside dust spinners. Everyone else avoids them. Most people think they're bad spirits, but you stood in one, your face turned up as if you were happy to be there." I stared at the muck under my feet, my brain scrabbling for something to say. Time stretched. Too much for it to seem as if I did anything but refuse to answer a senior dog. Uncle put a hand on my shoulder. "Tell me when you invent a good lie, Cooper." His voice was kind. "Or, if you respect me, the truth. The truth is better if it's something me and Goodwin ought to know. Elsewise, keep it to yourself. We all have our odd habits. I have a little garden I keep in window boxes in my room." I gawped at him. Tongue still just doesn't seem like the gardening sort. "Oh, yes," he said with a nod. "It's soothing. I grow miniature roses. A Yamani friend taught me. Red ones and yellow ones, the size of your little fingernail. Even a normal fellow like me has a surprise or two." He took out a toothpick and turned it over in his fingers. "You're not limping as bad as I expected." "I had an ointment, sir," I mumbled. He led us onto Jane Street. was busy with the carts that supplied the businesses of the day market. We kept to the high stone walkway that lifted us clear of most of the splashes. Even though we didn't wear our uniforms, everyone gave us a clear passage. From the way many of them looked at him, I think they knew Tunxel, or there was something about him that said Provost Dog. He tucked the toothpick into a pocket. Spinner. Was it like Mr. Snow said that night we went to Crookshanks? He told us your granddad and Da had strange magic with birds and pigeons following you. Is it like that, or does it just feel good? I swallowed. He was my training dog. The spinners collect things that folk have spoken, the really hurtful things, the wondrous things, the big things that get caught on breezes. Tunxel halted to stare at me. Or true? 3 people dodged around us. The third was a big fellow even bigger than Tunxel. He opened his gob like he was about to say something. Tunxel's head snapped up. He stared at the bigger cove with no feeling in his eyes whatever. The big man blinked, then hesitated. Tunxel shifted the tiniest bit. The other cove hurried on his way. I thought to memorize just how Tunxel had looked and moved so that I could do the same. Then I gave it up. I was no owl of 6 odd feet in height, and for all of Tunxel's humor, he had a deadly look. I hear all manner of things in the spinners, I told him, to answer his questions. Mostly nonsense. Not always. He drew me up against the shop's wall so folk could get by. Do they listen? Do they know you here? I shook my head. They're just happy I carried it away. It's like weight to them. They don't want it. I watched him as he went to tap the end of a baton he wasn't carrying. I wondered if I'd do the same after years as a dog. Did you hear anything of use today, Cooper? I licked my lips. This was a great matter, not passing bits to my Lord Gershom, but using them on my own account. 3 spinners heard at least 7 folk doused 1 or 2 nights back. They're buried secret where they were killed, mots and coves alike. Them that killed them are mage marked. If they talk, they die. I heard the mage tell them that, a woman mage. Tunxel began walking again, rubbing his chin. I had to step double to keep up. No names, no faces, just 7 folk. We don't know where they're buried. They've just vanished. Cooper. 10 times that vanished from the cesspool, any night of the week. Run off, die. I nodded. It sounded like a mumper's brag. All noise, no coin. But those folk go one at a time, not all together. I had to say it, even if I have choked to do it. Tunxel leaped to Tunxel's shoulder and delivered a good scolding at Cat. I was afraid Tunxel might dump him in the street muck. Instead, he began to laugh. Master Pounce, give us names or a place to dig, and we've somewhere to start, he said. We'll tell Goodwin. We'll talk with our birdies and ask around. Mayhap someone out there knows more of the story. Your spinners didn't just blend tales together. Magic is a chancy thing, Cooper. He looked at me sidelong. When you led my Lord Provost to the Bold Brass Gang, you may have been only 8, but you knew to track a man, not whispers on the wind. That's what good dog work is. Rumors and what your birdies say are useful, but in the end it's the dog's work that matters. I nodded as I looked at the ground. He was right, as far as it went. He didn't know the pigeon served the god of the dead, and mayhap he didn't know it took dog work to seek out the voices heard by a spinner, as well as it did chase down a scummer knob who thought he could smash any woman he liked. Tunxel went on. My Lord Gershom didn't place you with Goodwin and me. Who did that? So gods forbid anyone says she's got a soft spot for you. But I wasn't broken-hearted to have you with us. I always wanted a puppy. It's Clary who needs convincing. She always fusses over what's new. I was startled you picked the lower city, though. Being my lord's foster daughter, you could have gotten any district you asked for. I shrugged. It's what I understand, I mumbled. With your chances, I'd have picked Unicorn District or Pretty Bone. Hold up, puppy, we're here. Here was the Gem Merchants Guild Hall in the day market. The windows were barred with magic symbols writ around them and on the bars themselves. Signs were even carved into the stone wall. The doors were solid oak with iron fittings bespelled in their turn. Tunxel took me to the front entrance. Who was that? One of the guards swung her axe down to block Pounce's way. Pounce clearly had it in mind to vex the great dolt. He batted at the axe as if it was a toy, and then leapt over it as if it was 3 times as big. It's our cat, Tunstall said. We heard you had a terrible mouse problem. Our cat is so excellent he'll do for all your mice and some of your bigger rats, too. Don't bother to thank us. Tunstall scooped up Pounce, then he smiled. In some strange way, all the friendliness in his manner until that moment vanished with his smile. We're on the king's business, and you know my face. This is Guardswoman Cooper, my partner. We've an appointment with Junjin Berryman. He called me Guardswoman. Let him go, the man on duty told his partner. I know Tunstall, and Berryman will just bore them to death. Tunstall, he said, try to walk out afore you die of his gabble. I don't want the work of hauling your carcasses away, even the cats. I followed Tunstall inside. Pounce draped himself over Tunstall's shoulder, pointing his whiskers at me with his smuggest smile. I wished I could say he'd never been so venturesome, before I became a puppy, but it would have been a lie. Pounce is a venturesome stinker. The short hall was marked with frescoes showing folk in the gem business. Measuring, inspecting, setting, weighing, up beautifully carved stairs of fine wood we climbed, passing windows with pieces of colored glass set in make pictures. I was awed. Surely even the king's palace was not so grand. I might have gawped all day, but Tunstall hustled us onto the second floor and down a hallway. At the very last door on the left, he stopped and knocked hard, and thrust the door open. I was meditating on a very important spell. A man was seated at a big desk by an open window, one with no glass, only shutters. His round cap was crooked on his bald head, and he fought to sit upright, which made his meditation look more like a nap. He had a weak chin and looked like he rarely saw the sun. When he recognized my partner, he dropped back into his seat. Tunstall, you wretch! I thought you were some idiot wanting me to check yet another load of pearls. Then put a warning sign before you take your nap. Tunstall told him. I but closed my eyes for a moment, the mage protested, smoothing his well-made tunic. So would you if you'd tested 3 dozen pearls in a week. Pearl fakeries become a problem to the guild? Tunstall asked. Cooper, bar the door. Put that card on the string on the latch outside first so we're not interrupted. I did as I was told. When I turned around, the mage, Junjin Berryman, was squinting at me. What's happened to Goodwin? He asked weariedly. I hadn't heard. Goodwin's fine. Cooper is our puppy. Beka Cooper, Master Junjin Berryman. He slapped a white hand at me. I gave him enough of a bow as for a guild mage. I could have bowed deeper, I suppose, but he wasn't my lord, and he was nothing to the provost ministry. Pull up a chair and tell me what you want, Tunstall, and if you've got any good stories, I'll even feed you and your puppy. Whoa. The woe was Pounce's fault. He leapt on the Berryman's desk and batted a cloudy blue, gold, and black stone with his paws. Berryman saved it from falling. That's Pounce, Tunstall explained. He took a chair. He's going to be the first cat to earn pay as a dog. Cooper, close the shutters. You might want to light the lamps, Berryman. Berryman took another stone from Pounce. That's an uncut ruby you're chewing on, my friend. Tunstall, not the shutters. I kept them closed all winter. It's spring, in case you haven't noticed. I closed and locked them anyway. I answered to Tunstall, not some goggle-eyed bead counter. When I turned around, there were fires in all the room's lamps. Berryman had good ones, with bright polished brass in the back of the flames to cast triple the light. There's dark doings in the lower city, Berryman, Tunstall told the man. I went to stand behind my dog, as if he took that getting paid folly seriously. Pounce sat at Berryman's side, still curled around his 4 feet. Murder and vanishings. We think these stones may be involved. He upended the washed leather pouch on the desk. The stone spilled out. I remembered the stone in my breeches pocket, pressing against my leg. I wondered if I should remind Tunstall. No, I decided. I wouldn't forget there was one more in my keeping. Berryman pushed the stone apart with a rod he kept on his desk. Pounce reached out and drew away too. Then we all watched as Berryman's eyes got wide. Would he do his bulk had and pretend the stones were unknown to him or worthless? He would be a looby of the noblest class if he did, because his face gave away even bigger fortunes than Folk had. He reached out a hand, a lamp sailed over from the shelf nearby. The lamp was made special, the flames protected by a glass chimney so it didn't gutter in the air like others did. Half of it was backed with silver polish so bright it reflected an image of the flame. It did even better than brass to make the light brighter. Berryman lifted a pitcher that sat on his desk and started to pour from it into a cup that was there, but his hand shook. He tried to steady the pitcher and slopped its contents on its papers. Cooper, said Tunstall. I stepped around to take the Major's pitcher. I could see we'd been right about the stones if folk had made a mistake in lying to us. They had to be greatly important if a mage who handled pearls and rubies got the shakes so bad over them. Carefully, I poured water from the pitcher into the cup. Berryman dunked 2 fingertips into the cup and let them drip onto the rock, the biggest bulge of clear, jelly-like stone. Then he held it up before the lamp. The green stripe blazed out of the orange, brighter than we'd ever seen before. Tiny bits of red and blue sparked out along the edges. Now we could see a small pool of purple on the back side of the thing. Shacketh scales, said Berryman. He put the stone to one side. He did the same thing with each rock, showing us darts and blazes of color that appeared only when they were touched with water and held up to the light. He drank off the water in the cup, then motioned for me to pour him another. I did so, though I considered dumping the pitcher on his head to remind him I was no serving wench. He looked so rattled I changed my mind. Berryman sat back in his chair. He ran his fingers over his lips time after time, staring into the distance. Finally, Tunstall began to tap his foot on the floor. Berryman came to himself with a start. When Tunstall opened his mouth, the mage shook his head. First, he snapped his fingers 4 times. Signs appeared to in glowing yellow light on the wall. Then on the doors. There were 3, and the windows shuttered. It faded away. More yellow light appeared in keyholes and the gaps around the doors and shutters on the doors on the sides of the roof, standing cabinets. That too faded. Then I yelped as yellow light coated Tunstall pounced in me. My skin tickled. Then the light was gone. Forgive me, Cooper. Forgive me. Cooper, is it? But it's easy to attach listening spells to something, Berryman said. Please sit down. I assume Tunstall here trusts you? He looked at Tunstall. You'll understand my caution in a moment. Is there a problem with Goodwin on this? Tunstall shook his head. You'll hear of this meeting when we go on duty. We've talked about these baubles. As far as we know, we're the only ones who have them, apart from Cruikshank. Folk handled the first one that Beka got. Give it to him, Beka, and then you can sit down. I tried not to let my dismay show as I wrinkled the first stone from my breeches and placed it before the mage. It was so beautiful I didn't want him to take it from me. But orders are orders. I knew I'd have to give it up sometime. Once I put it down, I sat on the edge of the chair. Beautiful, said Berryman, holding it before the light, even without water or proper grinding to bring out the finer fires. I will assume Master Folk knows there is one of these stones about, but not more. Tunstall and I looked at each other. He wasn't about to tell Berryman of Pounce's aid in stealing this one. Berryman put my stone down and opened a desk drawer. From it he removed a black cloth bag embroidered with gold signs. Carefully he placed all of the stones in it, but the one I'd been carrying. I'll ward these against magical prying, he told Tunstall. That will keep the likes of Folk from calling them to him. Not worth it with this one. He tapped my stone and did nothing when Pounce nudged it. There's no piece of gemstone in that one, big enough to be worth money. There are just tiny pockets of the gem in the matrix, the surrounding rock. You may as well keep it then, Cooper, said Tunstall. A good luck stone since it came to you on your first night as puppy. Pounce had pushed it to the edge of the desk. I grabbed it before they could change their minds. I loved the pretty thing. Berryman traced each gold sign on the bag with his fingernail, yellow light trailing as he did so. When he pulled the drawstring tight and thrust the bag across the desk to Tunstall, it only went halfway. We all watched as Pounce walked over, grabbed the bag, and dragged it over to my dog. Thank you, Tunstall said as he picked it up. What an odd creature. Berryman didn't seem much interested in things not involving gems, even cats who weren't cat-like. He leaned back in his chair and said, Those stones are raw fire opals. The smallest fire opal that can be separated from its matrix without cracking is worth more than I earn from the guild in a year. They are very, very rare. Partly because they are hard to cut. There's a mine that's almost played out in Lugan, another in Marin, 5 more in Carthag, and none have pink-colored matrix stones like this. Only a trickle of new gems enter the market in any 1 year. He bit the nail on his little finger. Going on, Ferryman said. 2 finished stones and a pound of rough ones like these have come to this guild hall in the last 2 months. The seller is keeping his name secret and the broker is sworn to him. The stones are extraordinary. An auction of fire opals is to be held at the end of July. A big auction, so big that gem merchants from 15 countries are either here already or on their way. I thought the auction talk was just gossip. Sighed. I was wrong. If you sold those rough stones in the bag there, a good cutter could get at least 1 finished stone from each. You would be wealthy. NoxSolus smiled. It was his turn to lean back. He put his palms together before his face, then cupped them, and began to tap his fingers together. 1, 2, 3. It seemed Berryman wasn't the sort of fellow who needed folk to keep asking questions. All opals are powerful magical stones. Fire opals are fascinators, bewitchers. Properly enchanted, which these aren't, you'll be glad to know, they'll take and hold the attention of anyone the mage shows them to. They leave people open to suggestion from the mage or the person he works for. Fire opals don't hold spells for more than 3 or 4 days. You leave them in water for a time, then let them dry out, the stone will crack. It'll be useless for spellmaking after that. Most people love them for their value, because their magical uses are so limited, it's better to sell the stones and get very rich. Berryman rubbed his eyes. Are they coming from Matt's? NoxSolus' tapping fingers slowed to a stop. We don't know, he said, but the native stone is very like that of the lower city. Surely not, Berryman said. He seemed horrified and amused. It would be like finding pearls in dung. We would have found any stones of value there centuries ago. The lower city, so the tales went, had been good farmland when Chorus was first built on the Oleron River. Then had come the Centaur Wars. The first way to halt the armies was the huge earthworks built from our soil. Then they were carted away when the Anstey kings built the first city wall. The lower city's farms were less fruitful after that. In the decade of floods, the Oleron swamped the lower ground, where folk still farmed and carried much of it back to the riverbed with it when its waters shrank. With each flood, there was less black soil in the lower city. By the time the wall encircled the lower city, the rich black soil was but a couple of feet deep, and beneath it was the stone that shaped the ridges of Horus. So Granny Fern's tales explained how we spent as much of our summers yanking twice as much red as rock from our small garden, as we did vegetables. NoxSolus caught me thinking. Cooper? He asked with a smile. I did my best to look at him, who I knew. The old stories say the lower city used to have beautiful farms for all the good dirt there. I tried to say it like they taught us for dogs' reports, firm and clear. But it got taken away, and now all we've got is scrapings and rock like the rocks and the stones. What does a puppy know of such things? Berryman asked. He was surprised NoxSolus even let me speak. Maybe she's been educated to be a dog, my dear Mats, but I should think I have the advantage and knowledge of the land. She grew up in the lower city, NoxSolus explained. A lower city wench, Berryman said flatly, lessoning me on whether or not opals may be found in the disgusting sewer they call the cesspool. I clenched my fingers, wondering if his head would split like a melon if I hit it right with my baton. No offense, girl, Berryman told me, but you must leave this matter of what stones are found where, those who are educated to these things. I looked down. He might be one of those mages who could read murderous thoughts in my eyes. What did this underbaked flour dumpling know of the lower city and the people who lived there? Tunxel slapped the desk. I was on my feet before he was. Berryman, thanks, Tunxel said. You'll keep news of the Stones to yourself? But you haven't told me anything about them, Berryman complained. The man was actually whining. There's part of a crime, aren't they? A robbery. No, they must be murdered. For lower city dogs to be holding a fortune in fire opals, how many were killed? Where were they from? Carthag? Why haven't I heard of it? A hijacked shipment of gems. As far as I know, there aren't any Carthagi gem merchants in the city yet. And they're the only ones who could have so many fire opals. And they usually... Tunxel put his finger to his lips. Berryman pouted. It's an investigation, my friend, Tunxel explained. It's the quick one. Even my Lord Provost doesn't have the details. Lives are in the balance and depend on your discretion. You always say that. Berryman had turned from a man of power to a child who can't have a sweet. Have I ever lied? Tunxel asked him. The mage still pouted. No. Goodwin or I, or Cooper here, will tell you all of it, depending on who lives when the rats are caged. Right now it is a thing of blood and theft and dark deeds in the old city. Tunxel said it like a corner storyteller. From the shine of Berryman's goggling eyes, he drank it like the storyteller's audience. Had there been thunder and lightning outside, I think Berryman would have paid Tunxel for the pleasure of hearing him. Promise? Berryman asked. Promise, Tunxel replied. Cooper promises too, he added. Don't you, Cooper? I promise, I said to the desk. I should have been a dog, Berryman told us. You have such dashing lives. All I do is a bit of magic here and there, and then off to home. He sighed. I started. He believes our lives dashing? What would he have thought of jumping through Orva's window with no inkling of what lay on the other side? Would he have found landing in Fishgutch dashing? Tunxel kicked me lightly on the ankle. I don't know if I would have said what I truly thought. Mayhap Tunxel is used to Goodwin and kicked me to keep me silent just in case. Berryman, we could not do this without you, without your advice, he said, as solemn as a priest. Be sure your name will be in our final report to my Lord Provost. Berryman was so happy with this that he walked us to the Guildhall entrance, though I wondered if he didn't do it so the guards could hear him call Tunxel my friend, and watched him clap my dog on the shoulder. I've seen people like Berryman at Provost's house, folk who thought it daring to be friends with dogs. I was just surprised to see any of them who could be of use for more than buying supper and drinks. He's a very good mage, Tunxel said as we went on our way, and he'll do all kinds of mage work for the dog gossip. You need folk like him, Cooper. He's a useful cove to know. Tunx cried, "Mah," as if he agreed. Good cat, Tunxel said, and picked him up. Then you, me, and Goodwin will get this puppy licked. Tunxel had an errand to run. He left me at the kennel gate so I could go to the training yard and stumble through an hour of practice on kicking. When I saw him at muster, he was giving a hoot at a bag of fire opals to be logged in. I had a feeling that wealth would not go into the happy bags for the street dogs. But I could only shrug. Unlike Scummer, bold foals up the hill. Goodwin was in better spirits when we mustered it for our watch. She listened close as Tunxel explained what Berryman had told us on our way to the market. So we just kissed our fortunes farewell. She just also sounded better after a night's sleep and time for healing to work. The bruise on her jaw was still astounding, but I could understand her well now. That will teach us to be honest. Maybe we ought to take Berryman on rounds with us sometime. Maybe we ought to take Berryman on rounds sometime, Matt. He'll probably faint before we cross into the cesspool. He looked back at me as we ambled up Jane Street. He's not a bad sort. He just sometimes lets being a merchant's mage do his talking for him. When you smarten him up, he improves. I glanced at her. Had she gotten the temptation to hit him too? At least we know where the rocks are now, said Tunxel with a nod to a passing rag picker. I'd like to see where Cruikshank gets them. I hate to know that old Spintree is getting any richer. Goodwin spun her baton on its rawhide cord. If they were clean and legal, Berryman would know. They'd have come through the Guildhall, which means they're smuggled or local. Either way, too many big money stones could set up a robber's ball down here. Either way, Too many big money stones. Could set up a robber's ball down here. I cleared my throat without looking back at me. Goodwin held up her hand and twitched her first two fingers, telling me to cough up. Why didn't Berryman try to keep the stones? I asked. He's a mage, and he said they'd make us rich. Addle, poor Cuddy, Tunstall told me over his shoulder. He doesn't care about fattening his own purse. I think he's spelled so he's never tempted to pocket all those gems he handles. He's got a rich wife, Goodwin said. Some folk just aren't greedy. Don't say that where the gods can hear, Tunstall whispered. They hate talk of things unnatural. Then they should have stomped Berryman years ago, because it's unnatural for a man not to want to lift a ruby here and there. The first half of the evening passed easily enough. Plenty of drunken lubies greeted me by trying to say fleet-footed fish puppy. Orva's man, Jack Ashmiller, he was called, came to apologize for his woman, Goodwin. She was gentler to him than she'd been with anyone but Pounce that I'd seen. The cuts on his face were swollen, the one over his eye holding it shut. He had no coin for a healer mage or even a hedge witch's stitching or mumper. Whilst Tunstall and me waited for them to finish talking, something rotten hit the back of my uniform. I heard a hiss from the shadows. However their papa felt, the young Ashmillers wouldn't forgive me for my part in their mama's hobbling. On we walked, my muscles groaning with each step. I got to stand off and watch as my dog put a halt to 3 purse cuttings, 4 pocket pickings, and 5 thefts from shops. It was wonderful to see how quick they moved, how smoothly they broke up trouble. Tunstall asked me what they looked for on the purse cuttings and pocket pickings beforehand, until even Goodwin said I could spot cut purses in a voice better than most second-year dogs. Whenever we had 3 or 4 rats in hobbles, we'd take them along to the cage carts, positioned around the lower city for transport back to the kennel. Just to swing along to the Stuvik side of the night market, Tunstall said. Last, I'd say all 3 of us have earned our supper good and truly tonight. I can pay for my own, I heard my fool self say. I owe you a silver noble and 5 coppers from Roxo's bride. I got 2 silvers out of him. I'll take those coins, Goodwin said, putting out a hand. I turned them over to her. As I did, Tunstall said, Crown pays for half our meals, wherever we feed, and me and Goodwin say who pays the rest. You're a good puppy. You do your work. We feed you, Goodwin told me. I blinked. Tunstall was supposed to be nice to me. Goodwin was supposed to be gruff. After last night, you've earned your meals for a while, so be quiet about it, and goddess, you were half the block from Crookshank's house by then. The startled Goodwin was the crack of breaking glass, and aren't glass windows stupid and gaudy for a man living right on the edge of night market? A moment later, flames shot out of the front of Crookshank's house from a hole where the window had been. The front door slammed open. Folk threw themselves out onto the steps. We saw orange glare over the wall around the house's sides. The fire starters had struck there too. We took out our batons. Now we know the rogue's revenge, Goodwin said as we started to run. Cooper, wet your handkerchief in the fountain, keep it over your mouth and nose. Fountain, she pointed with 2 handkerchiefs in that hand, hers and Tunstall's. I grabbed them, yanked mine out, dashed over and dunked them, and fetched them back, soaked. Tunstall grabbed his and ran. Goodwin waved me to the front door. Upstairs, Cooper, the garret. Get whoever you can, get them out. Send them through the side doors. I'll be on the 2nd floor, don't be stupid. I clapped my handkerchief over my mouth and nose. In we went. Under the plume of smoke that came from the burning room off the side, I smelled cooking oil before I followed Goodwin up 1 set of stairs and ran up 2 more on my own. A couple of maids darted past me. I ran on up to the tiny steps to check the rooms under the steep roof, empty. Back down 1 flight I went. Tansy was dumping her jewelry case into a pillow slip. I boxed her ears for wasting time, shoved the case into the slip and knotted it. Then I poured her water pitcher on the sheet, threw the sheet over her, and shoved her out the door. Her maid was huddled forgotten in the corner, stiff with terror. I couldn't get her to stand. I finally dragged her from the room and down the steps until she scrambled to her feet and ran out. Back to Tansy's floor I went. I checked room after room, looking out a window. Looking out a window, I saw folk down below. Formed bucket brigades to douse the fires on the ground floor. Once I was certain everyone on the 3rd floor was gone, I went to the 2nd floor to look for Goodwin. I had a notion she wasn't clearing the household out. My notion was right. Cat, this is a bad time and place. Do your business outside, you idiot creature. Her voice led me to rooms that had to be the ones shared by Crookshank and his wife. It looked as if she'd been searching his papers and cupboards. She stood in the middle of his workroom with a ledger in her hands, taken from a table stacked with them. Pounce stood on the big desk, digging fiercely in a pile of letters. Goodwin shut the ledger with a snap and put it with the others. Crone's teeth if he ruins anything useful, Cooper. Pounce, stop that, I said, though I could tell he was looking for something. He knew I wasn't serious. I helped Goodwin pick up some papers that had fallen to the floor. It looks as if they got the fires controlled, though the smoke's still nasty. Pounce murdered, with a snap of wooden panel in the desk surface popped open, almost smacking him. He jumped back, tail switching, and yowled in triumph. Goodwin straightened, papers in her hand. You pesky little beast. How did you even know that compartment was there? Cooper, you saw him, same as me. He deliberately went after it. Goodwin went to the desk and checked the compartment for booby traps before she removed what it held, a small sheaf of notes. He does things like that, I told her with a shrug. Goodwin set aside the other papers she'd gathered. She looked over the notes in the compartment, swore, then closed the lid and stuffed the notes down the front of her tunic. Let's get out of here before they come looking for us. She picked up the things that Pounce had scattered and tossed them on the desk so it looked like it had never been disturbed. I followed Goodwin. The fires were almost out. Smoke had ruined Cookshank's fancy things downstairs, but he could well afford to replace them. Hardly a person in the crowd that had gathered didn't wish the house had burned to the ground. I found Tansy on her own, shivering in her wet sheet. The spring night had gotten chilly. I peeled the sheet off. You'd think they'd pity him, losing a great-grandbaby, I said. I looked around to see if anyone had fetched blankets. Tansy's belly was a mound against her thin house dress. At least she wasn't in bedclothes at this early hour. Why should they? She asked, hugging the pillow slip with her jewels. Enough of them have lost a child lately, and no one's raised a fuss about theirs. I guided her to a fountain bench, but it wasn't all from the goodness of my heart. On our way, I grabbed a blanket from a maid's hand. She yelped and yanked and let go when I glared at her. She wasn't wet and pregnant. I got Tansy wrapped around before I made her sit, whispering as I did, What do you mean? She rolled her big blue eyes at me. Everyone says it's just slave catchers calling themselves by a nightmare name. They say the little ones always go missing down here, but some are different. See that thin Maud over there? The round scar on her cheek? Her ma left her a spellbook, onlyest bit of value the poor thing ever had. Middle of the night, a cove's voice beside her bed tells her where and when to leave it for the shadow snake. Elsewise she'll weep for it. Gave her a week. She didn't do it. Not the only thing she had from her ma. After the week, her little girl, only 4 years old, vanished, just like that. Nancy's lips trembled. The dogs, those little ones, vanish all the time in the lower city. Did she try the slave traders? Of course she tried the slave traders. For all the good it did, she searched for months. She still looks at girls that age with white blonde hair, just in case. It was 15 months ago. But it could have been anybody, I said, just because someone says she'll be sorry. They drew a snake and ash on the little girl's apron and left it hung on the clothesline for the mother to take down. Nancy whispered. They left it on her pillow inside the house, too. When the whisper in the night came again, that poor creature thought of her 2 younger children and left a spellbook where she was told. I clenched my hands. Preying on folk who had so little was more than bad. It was vicious. But it's only one time this cove says he's shadow snake, Tansy. Watch my finger, Beka. I'm not going to name them for you. She pointed again and again and again. 12 times she pointed at different people in the crowd. It's been going on almost 3 whole years. All of them have a piece of their child's clothing with that shadow snake on it. They had something the shadow snake wanted. Them that didn't give it up right off, well, some of them got their little ones back all right. As a corpse. Some never saw their little one again. Grandpa Almond got a bit of paper asking for something. He said no snake would ever ring him like a 3-month-old hen. Only they didn't ring him, Beka. Tears rolled down Tansy's plump cheeks. They rung my little Roland. I pay for protection! I recognized Crookshank's ragged screech. He was yelling at my dogs. I pay more into that happy bag than anyone on this street. For that, I expect protection! He swayed on his steps, shaking a bony finger at Tunstall and Goodwin. 3 of his rushers stood at his back, hands on their weapons. Smoke still rolled out of the broken window behind them. I belonged up there with my dogs, but I didn't want to leave Tansy. I looked around until I spotted Anish. She came over. Come on, girl, she said, gathering Tansy up, blanket and all. Let's stop Father from making even more of a fool of himself. Tansy yanked free. Why? I don't owe him. He got Roland killed. Anish grabbed her arm. We're stuck with him. She spoke in Tansy's ear. The words were not meant for me, but I have very good hearing. And we have more to lose. Don't think we're free just because Roland's gone. You need to think of the babe that's coming. I'll be an obedient granddaughter-in-law. As she tugged Tansy over to the steps, I cut around them to stand behind my dogs. Tunstall was saying, You'd have to pay 10 times what you do to get enough dogs to guard against the rogue's wrath, my friend. These lads know it as well as we do, he nodded to Crookshank's rushers. Did you think Kafir Dearborn would let your speech last night go unspanked? Crookshank stared at him, trembling in fury. Why do you think he had a hot hand in killing your great-grandson? Goodwin asked, her arms folded over her chest. Last night you accused him of it. What have you got that he might want that bad? Crookshank went dead white under the soot on his face. He spun and rammed through the wall of guards behind him and dashed into the house, smoke and all. The rushers looked at each other, then followed, covering their noses and mouths with their arms. Well, that shut the old vulture up, Tunstall said cheerfully. Where's Cooper and the cat? Right in back of us, Goodwin said. Let's go. I'm past hungry. We'll be lucky if there's any ham left at the mantel and pullet. I moved so they could pass us and muttered, They could have waited to burn the place till we had our supper. Both of them turned to face me. Pounce looked up at me and meowed. She spoke, Tunstall said. Goodwin, did you hear? She actually made a joke. It was practically conversation. Goodwin elbowed him. Don't let it go to your head. Look, she's going shy again. It was true. I could feel the ground draw my eyes toward it. Pounce jumped onto my shoulder and settled across my back, just behind my neck. Consoled me for making idiotic remarks where my dogs could hear. He began to purr. We weren't lucky. There was no more ham at the mantel and pullet. The chicken had been on the spit so long it was dry. The bread, warming by the hearth since before supper rush, was also dry. At least the fried greens were passable. The cook was so heartbroken at putting such a poor meal before long-time customers like Tunstall and Goodwin that she quickly fried some almond cakes and served them drizzled in honey. The ale was free. The cook brewed rose-hip tea for me. Once they had done hovering, Goodwin fetched the papers out of her tunic. All 4 of us, including Pounce, leaned in to look. Goodwin placed each piece side by side, the back of the note face up. Each was signed with a long, double-curved snake, written ash. When you grub in the snake's earth, you owe a payment to the snake, Tunstall read softly. He pulled a second note over to read it. 15 stones to the snake, left in a leather purse behind the lonely journey altar. Death's Temple on Glassman Square, a week from today, or you'll pay with your own kin. He whistled. Not very nice. Goodwin leaned her head on her hands. I thought maybe I'd mistook it when I'd glanced at it in the house. You were wrong, my buck. There is a shadow snake. A real one. We have the evidence right here, she smiled crookedly. The boogie is real. I'd rather he wasn't, I said. Are the other notes the same? You think yourself safe, Goodwin read from the second one. A snake finds gaps in every wall. The child is now in the snake's coils. 1 week from today, 30 stones in a leather bag behind the lonely journey altar. Death's Temple on Glassman Square, or there will be blood. He didn't pay up the first time, so the snake doubles the tally. Takes Roland and gives him a new week to pay, Tunstall said. I'm surprised Crookshank didn't have an aploxy. He gets half mad when folk give him orders. Arranged for his rushers to beat a captain of the guard who turned him back from the palace gate. The cove was crippled when they'd done. Goodwin read the third note. You have more to lose. 40 stones. You know where to leave them. The night of the full moon. He made a face. The snake isn't done with Crookshank, and the old man knows it. I was cold. I gave Roland horsey rides in the day market once. I let him chew my braid when he was teething. Times Tansy escaped Crookshank's watchers. Might I have put a stop to this, had I known? But I hadn't. Crookshank was getting those notes when Roland was taken. I was moving into my new home. After, when I heard the old man had the house under such tight guard that Tansy couldn't get out, nor I get in. My first real talk with her in 3 months was on Monday. Why didn't she tell me then about the shadow snake, I wondered. But I knew the answer already. Tansy was so much happier and sillier before Roland was killed, after she had learned to keep secrets. But I think Crookshank did know the snake meant business, I said, clenching my hands. What? Goodwin asked. Hans crawled into my lap and began to purr. I stroked him as I told Tunstall and Goodwin what Tansy had told me about the missing children and the sign of the snake left behind. Of the things the snake had wanted from those parents, I even said. She told me some of them went to the kennel and reported it, but nothing was done. Did you know? I mustered my courage to look at them. Surely they didn't turn their back on the poor of the lower city, not Tunstall and Goodwin. But Tunstall was carving a piece from the table as a toothpick. Goodwin frowned. What do you want from us, Cooper? She asked. Do you know how many robberies there are in a day in the lower city? How many burglaries? How many purse cuttings, rapes, brawls? Folk disappear or die all the time, children in particular. We don't have a third of the dogs we need to cover the lower city alone. We do what we can. I wanted to ask. You didn't seek on any of them? But the words stuck in my throat. I know the numbers. We were made to memorize them our first day of training and to repeat them when asked. We learned them by district, each district from Palace to Highfield, at a particular place in every puppy's memories, with its numbers for disorder or crime, its numbers for dogs and for mages who might be problems, and its chiefs under the court of the rogue. I could say them in my sleep. Could have been me that went missing, I said. My brothers, my sisters, any of us, vanished or dead in a gutter, a snake on our pillows, and Mama's heart broke. She was so frail, it would have killed her before her time. I looked at them. It could still be one of them, if they weren't safe in my Lord Provost's house. Wake up, Cooper, Goodwin said it, but she did not seem angry. Do you know how many mothers drowned newborns in pots and privies or in rain barrels? How many fathers and uncles tossed them into the rear yard with broken skulls? Someone they know or some stranger who offers a solid meal hurts them and leaves them to die. Uncle's eyes were sad. And plenty sell 'em to the slavers. Instead of telling folk and face the shame, they say the child just vanished. Savor your good luck, Cooper. Savor it for you and your family. If we catch the snake, we'll catch it. But there aren't enough of us to chase every vanished cove, mott, and child. Not near enough. Goodwin rubbed the scar on her cheek. Tunstall says you've word of 7 missing motts and coves. We haven't heard anyone hunting for them, let alone the odd vanished child. Let's get moving. Toughen up, Cooper. That's my advice. Got to her feet. Before you jump into the Oleron or slice your wrists. We lose 5 dogs a year to the Black God's option. Don't you be one. We look around on patrol, Cooper, Tunstall said as he stood. But it's harder once it gets dark. Not many littles around, and their faces aren't clear, and it hurts. Find enough dead ones, and you don't want to know after a while. The older ones, they went looking for it most of the time, not the dead children. In the lower city, we are supposed to give up pretty ideas and dreams. I'm vexed with myself to find I've nursed some about these two. They are only human, and their people aren't from here. Tunstall is a barbarian from the eastern hills, and Goodwin family are respectable members of the Carpenters Guild. My dogs don't know what it's like to not have no one fighting for them. They do their job, and that gives them plenty of work, looking out for them that fill the happy bags. I won't content myself with filling the happy bags, not ever. The lower city is mine. Its people are mine. Its children are mine. I find them that's doing all this kidnapping and murdering. They'd best pray for mercy, because once I get my teeth in them, I will never let them go. And I start with the shadow snake. We washed up from supper and left for the last 2 hours of our watch. I had plenty to think on. Luckily, we returned to the night market, where it was too busy to give me time to think. I was taken up learning to tell the differences between minnows and pikes, and learning how to spot the best in the night market forests and the sutlers. I came home with eyeballs that jumped from trying to look everywhere at once to write in this journal. I have only been a puppy 3 days, yet it feels like 3 years. I feel I have changed so much from the Mott who wrote her account on that first day. Who will I be by week's end? And that there is the end of part 3 of Beka Cooper. Thank you so much for listening, and let me know if the audio was better this time than it was last time. I hope it was. Sorry for my inability to do funny voices today. I really tried. But I will see you guys next time. Thanks for hanging out. Bye!